Good morning, everybody. I want to take a minute and introduce Miss Christine Johnson. She is our co-facilitator today. We got together and chatted and came up with a idea of working on supporting students with disabilities. And so we're going to go through this webinar today. It's going to be put up on the AIVRTTAC.org website, and we're going to share that with WINTAC as well. So Christine, if you want to jump in real quick and introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Christine Johnson. I'm a senior research associate with the George Washington University. We are actually one of the partners with the WINTAC, which is the Workforce Innovation and Technical Assistance Center. And I am part of the Pre-Employment Transition Services team. And I'm very happy to be here and working with Wayne again. We'll go back a long way.
And I'm with the American Indian VR Training and TA Center, AIVRTTAC, with Northern Arizona University. We're housed under IHD, and we are part of the Tech Assistance Grant specifically for AIVRS programs. And so this partnership is exciting and long overdue.
And the WINTAC is also a national technical assistance center, and it's led by Interwork Institute at San Diego State University. And we are also funded by the Rehabilitation Services Administration to provide technical assistance to state VR agencies and their partners to help them meet the requirements of the Rehab Act as amended by the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. So, next slide. Okay, there's our contact information. So we're very happy to have all of you join us today for this learning opportunity, and we hope that it will start some conversations and some positive working relationships between state VR programs and tribal programs. So I think, as John said earlier, we will have the PowerPoint slides available and the recording. It will be on the AIVRTTAC website as well as the WINTAC website. And finally, if you'd like to obtain CRC credits for attending the webinar, we have the link at the last slide of this presentation, and also you'll find it posted in the chat box also. But you will take an evaluation survey and a short quiz, and the George Washington University will be providing those CRC credits.
We've also piggybacked AIVRTTAC survey on that as well. So you'll see that at the last slide. And we ask that you please fill that out to give us information on the presentation itself. And as you can tell, Christine and I have done this before. So we put it at the end of the presentation, so you have to stay here with us.
There you go. All right. So these are our learning objectives for the next hour and a half. We hope that you understand the importance of being able to identify transition and pre-employment transition services for American Indian, Alaskan Native youth with disabilities, to recognize the importance of developing a collaborative process that allows state VR agencies to provide pre-employment transition services, and the AIVRS programs to provide transition services, and also to recognize the services that each of the partners can provide based on the federal regulations for transition services to American Indian and Alaska Native youth. And finally, to understand how to develop an effective partnership between AIVRS programs and state VR agencies. So the purpose of this collaboration, like Wayne said, is really AIVRTTAC and WINTAC wanted to be able to provide tools and techniques so that AIVRS program personnel can be supported in serving youth in transition, and also to assist state VR agencies in the virtual provision of pre-employment transition services to Native youth. So on this outline, we're going to kind of look at how the AIVRS program, state VR, and education support students and youth with disabilities, look at the definitions and for transition and the pre-employment transition services. We're going to talk about what the AIVRS programs and the state VR each bring to the table and their expertise, looking at factors that we can consider to develop a working partnership in order to deliver services, and how to build an infrastructure that will help in delivering in-person and remote services for students. We're going to have 2 states that will share their examples of how they serve students, Native students with disabilities. And finally, slides rich with resources. And again, we'll have question and answer at the end. All right, so let's look at how we support students with disabilities. On this slide, you're seeing the definition of transition services as it occurs in the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, as found under 34 CFR 300.43. So notice that it starts out by saying it's a coordinated set of activities designed to be within a results-oriented process, focusing on improving the academic and functional achievement of a child with a disability in order to facilitate the child's movement from school to post-school activities. And that can include post-secondary education, vocational education, integrated employment, including supported employment, continuing and adult education, adult services, independent living, or community participation. It's based on that individual child's needs, and it takes into account their strengths, preferences, and interest, and includes instruction, related services, community experiences, development of employment, and other post-school adult living objectives. And also, if appropriate, the acquisition of daily living skills and provision of a functional vocational evaluation. And so finally, it says that they can these transition services may be special education if provided a specially designed instruction or a related service, if required to assist a child with a disability to benefit from special education. Next slide. So we just saw what education defines as transition. What we see on this slide is actually, it's a shared understanding here of looking at the definition of transition under the AIVRS Part 371, and also under the Rehab Act 34 CFR 361, oh goodness, 360, I had trouble seeing that, 361.5 C55 of transition services. I'm not going to read these, but looking at these, they are identical. These are mere definitions, exactly the same. They are based very much on the definition of transition under IDEA. So this is actually showing that between the state VR programs, the AIVRS programs, and education partners, we are all working off this same definition. It's that coordinated set of activities for that student or youth with a disability. Again, it's an outcome-oriented process. It's based on that individual student or youth's needs, and we take into account their preferences and their interests. We're looking at the whole gamut of instruction, community experiences, helping them look at employment and things that will help prepare them for post-school adult living. And finally, at the end, it's also on this slide, it's also talking about including that outreach to and engagement of parents. So it's very critical. It's kind of laying this foundation for us to build those local partnerships and kind of guide our day-to-day practices so that we are all working together to support students as they go through their transition planning and achieve any post-school outcomes for their life and working with the families. Next slide. And I'll let Wayne, this is Wayne's beautiful, beautiful slide. So I'm going to let Wayne kind of take it from here.
Thanks. And actually, I stole this from the AIVRTTAC team, so I can't take credit for it. So we were working on trying to get an idea of the flow for pre-employment transition services and transition services. With my background in state VR and then tribal VR, I wanted to try and show how we could get this to flow, and especially where we focus on transition in the AIVRS world. So we have, as you can see, all the outlying bubbles. We have our student with the disability in the middle. With the state side of it, I also think that there's a potential for students with potential disabilities, not necessarily diagnosed at this point. So we need to probably update the language a little bit, but we have the student at the center. We have AIVRS, we have family, we have the local school, other stakeholders such as community rehab providers, that type of thing, state VR. And as you can see, everything rolls out to that post-secondary education, vocational training, competitive integrated employment type bubble. The end goal for everybody involved is to help these kiddos transition into some sort of functional career for them at their level. And really, pre-employment transition services and transition services were designed to help these individual kiddos get out of just the laundry folding positions or just the janitorial positions. Now, there's nothing wrong with those positions at all. However, we found that a lot of these kiddos were getting just kind of trapped in that as the only job opportunity. So with this type of model, we're able to explore all available employment situations that are compatible with that individual's skills. So AIVRS can do transition, the student can do their own transition, state VR does transitions, as well as the pre-employment transition services.
And hopefully what the outcome is that this coordination, collaboration with all the partners and people who are supporting the student, that this actually gives us better outcomes, such as, you know, increased high school graduation rates and decreased dropout rates. That these students go on to achieve any kind of post-secondary goals that they've got, as Wayne said, competitive integrated employment, and you know, that they're getting jobs that give credential attainment and measurable skill gains. So ultimately the workforce is getting these students and they're better prepared. Next slide. So now I'm going to take a few minutes and kind of look at what is transition and pre-employment transition services for students with disabilities. Next slide. All right. So with the passage of the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act and the amendments to the Rehabilitation Act of '73, we now can offer, as a state VR program, the pre-employment transition services. So it's a new service. It kind of extends this continuum of services specifically for students with disabilities. These pre-employment transition services are the earliest set of services that are available for students with disabilities under the state VR program. They are short-term in nature, and they help, they're designed to really help the student identify career interests. So it's an early start to job exploration. A lot of these students don't get those opportunities. And if they so desire, they can then further explore their career interest and such with additional vocational rehabilitation services, such as transition or other individualized VR services. So it's helping these students with that preparatory exploration for the foundation. Next slide. The 5 required pre-employment transition services that you will find under the state VR program are job exploration counseling, work-based learning experiences, and this can include in-school or after-school opportunities, or anything maybe outside of the traditional school setting, including internships, as long as it's provided in as integrated an environment as possible in the community. It also includes counseling on opportunities for these students for enrollment in comprehensive transition and post-secondary educational programs, workplace readiness training that helps them develop social skills and independent living, and of course, instruction and self-advocacy that can also incorporate peer mentoring. Next slide. So with the state VR provision of pre-employment transition services, this is really an opportunity here that can be very beneficial to the AIVRS programs. State VR agencies have to set aside no less than 15% of their federal grant monies to provide or arrange for the provision of pre-employment transition services. And then the VR has to make these 5 required activities available statewide to all students with disabilities in need of services, including American Indian students with disabilities who are eligible or potentially eligible for the VR program. So it's really providing much greater opportunities with this kind of dedicated funding, even though it's not increased funding, but it's set aside specifically for students. Next slide. Okay, so again, I kind of spoke about this. It's an early stage of employment exploration. So now the state VR program offers this continuum with transition services representing that next set of VR services available to students and youth with disabilities. It can also include group transition services and individualized transition services. Next slide. Okay, for transition services, any allowable VR service under Section 103A of the Act, 361.48B, and also under the AIVRS program 371.6, can be provided as a transition service under an approved IPE. So this slide shows you some examples of what could be considered a transition service in an approved IPE for a student with a disability. So there's a wide range of activities that we can use to help support students with transition. Next slide. And I'll turn it over to you, Wayne.
All right, so now we're going to chat about what we bring to the table, both in the AIVRS world and the state VR world. So with state VR, you know, they have the expertise of knowledge and resources for the provision of these pre-employment transition services. And it really is about, you know, the upfront exploration that serves as the foundation for continuing the transition services as we go. They also bring in knowledge of youth resources, collaboration with state and local education agencies and the workforce, experience in connecting with youth and families. So we see a lot of good stuff coming from the state side that a lot of our AIVRS programs have limited access to just because of the location and the relationship with some of the agencies in that area. So AIVRS programs bring to the table the expertise of their service area, which is the rural communities and villages that are out there, the family structure, including a clanship or whatever structure your tribal area follows, how to connect with the Native youth and their families, the cultural and traditional services that are available, and cultural traditional events that are connected to the seasons. This is very important because it allows you to understand how and where you're going to be working with those families. It also has expertise in the areas of the historical traumas that have impacted each tribal community that we work with, and how to assist in developing those relationships with that historical trauma in mind. AIVRS also knows how to, or has the expertise of how to engage Native youth with the state VR to help create that easy pass-through for the pre-employment transition services. So kind of that buffer for the relationship to help foster it quicker and get those services out to our youth in need. The role of our AIVRS programs, you know, this one is always tricky because we have a lot of aunties and grandmas in the VR world, AIVRS world, and if anybody has been around any Native aunties or moms or grandmas, they know that they don't always wait for an invitation, but we have to have that we have in the IEP world and in the education world, we have to be invited to that meeting. And if you get invited to that meeting, be prepared, bring along your AIVRS informational material, discuss the eligibility criteria for services to pursue employment, and discuss the AIVRS VR process. In developing that relationship with your local school, it provides, an opportunity for creating awareness about AIVRS and to potentially increase the steady flow of those applicants and consumers. We can also serve as a role in connecting the school with the student and again to that pass through to the services from the state VR program.
So now we're going to kind of talk about partnership development, and really it's based on the exact foundation that vocational rehabilitation counseling with our consumers is based on. It's should be based on respect for each other, active listening, and building that working alliance, so that this is how we can make sure that in concert together we are really looking at having better outcomes and maximizing those outcomes for both of our agencies. So that quality relationship and partnership development is one way to achieve those goals. Next slide. Okay, so here are some factors that we want to consider when we look at partnership development for service delivery. I'll take a few here and then let Wayne jump in, but there should be current interagency agreements between state VR programs and the American Indian Vocational Rehabilitation tribal programs. So those should be current, and they spell out kind of how the two agencies are going to work together to serve mutual consumers. There should be administrative support from all entities. So it's not just the local level counselors working together, but the support should go on up the chain. And identify liaisons, whether it's from the AIVRS program, from your local education agencies, or your state VR programs. Wayne, I'll let you kind of finish that one up.
Yep. So, the other part of it is establishing a process and a plan, getting together regularly to discuss changes. A lot of times within the tribal world, there's a lot of changes with our governments that can happen rapidly. So we just need to, have those regular meetings to stay up to date. Referral process, how do we do it? Who do we talk to? Especially in these uneven time or unstable times, we have a lot of turnover in staff, both within the AIVRS and the state VR world. And then the joint service delivery, we need to discuss how we're going to do that. Who's doing what, when, and how. We have to have a coordination of transition services with the other entities. And this is where that teamwork and that collaboration really comes together. Do you have, is the developmental disabilities program involved? Is the community rehab program involved with the state? What tribal programs are available for the youth with disabilities? Is there tribal education involved? All those different questions that need to be answered. We need to establish goals and evaluating progress. What are the goals that we have for this youth with disabilities, and how do we evaluate that progress? Engagement and participation of student with disabilities and family. And this is where that development of the partnership is very critical, as mentioned before.
Yeah.
So some of the factors to consider in the partnership is we kind of start looking at what Christine mentioned earlier, respect, use intermittent eye contact. In a lot of our tribal cultures with our elders, parents, aunties, grandmas, direct eye contact is a challenge, and it's the ultimate show of disrespect. So we got to look at the eye contact, talk to the people, not talk about people, especially when we get together as a group. A lot of the Native Americans, Alaskan Natives, we talk to everybody. It's not just one person. Handshakes, be careful with that. Sometimes they're disrespectful. In a lot of our beliefs, we pass on stuff through touch. So offer it, wait to see if it's going to be taken or not, but don't take offense if people don't shake hands, because maybe culturally our belief is that we can't shake hands. And slow down. So many times we get wrapped up in trying to get this kiddo this youth to the table, and we shouldn't push them that fast. We need to slow down and let everybody kind of accept where we're at, what we're doing. Connect with somebody in the community that's an elder or a council member that's invested in a relationship building that's taken place. Another thing that we found is that increasing the time on the reservation or the service area, be seen as a positive presence. In the past, a lot of the state vehicles that pull on were there for other reasons, not to help people and not to help families. So increase your time out there, be seen, be willing to work with groups and families. That's a big one. Participate in community events. And probably the last one, we're as Indigenous people and we've survived a lot of trauma, and we've done that by being able to laugh at ourselves and our friends and family. And I laugh at Tom a lot because he provides that opportunity for me, and I'm sure it's in return. Just relax and laugh. I mean, you're going to be the butt of jokes, that's fine, but pretty soon you'll be involved in the teasing.
Okay, so now we're going to kind of touch on how to deliver services in person and remotely. So let's, next slide, let's look here at the basics. You want to be able to have a process for connecting with the students in the provision of pre-employment transition services. And we'll hear from our co-presenters here shortly on how they do some of this. How to develop a plan and map out how services are going to be provided, how you're going to know when the service is complete, when you're providing virtual provision of pre-employment transition services. So through the internet virtually, you're going to have to identify a platform for service delivery and making sure that that's something that's available for Native youth and students. Identifying appropriate pre-employment transition services curriculum and resources. You're wanting to look at that you're all on the same page of how the student participation, progress, and outcomes are going to be tracked, reported, and measured for both of your agencies. Also identifying the ways that you can enhance any of the student and family engagement in services, so that regular communication. And again, most importantly, you're working with your local education agencies so that you're having a plan for sharing student interest inventories and career assessment results, and you're talking with them. Next slide. So when we are in-person delivering services, this is our common way that we've been doing this before COVID. So again, choosing the learning activities and resources that you're going to use, deciding how you provide that support and feedback, and how to communicate and provide that support to the parents. So usually now we're looking at in-person programs. You look at summertime as being a very popular way to engage youth, especially in work-based learning activities or advocacy, maybe getting them to explore what college campuses are like, taking those trips. So you're wanting to look and say, what's happening in your community? What are the opportunities if you're able to do that in person now? Wayne, did you have anything you want to add on that?
You know, a lot of the AIVRS programs have really good summer programs with their tribe, and that's a huge opportunity for us to get those transition services out there and to partner with the states in providing those pre-employment transition services to the youth. So it's really valuable to connect with your local tribe and AIVRS program to see if there's anything like that available.
Okay, next slide. So when we're looking at virtual or remote service delivery, it's how we shift now with in this time of COVID to that remote service delivery is really varied across nations and within each state. So again, what would be the infrastructure that you have in your community that can provide this, and what kind of technology is it going to support virtual communication, and are your students and youth able to get to these connections? So you'll identify maybe internet options or smartphone apps, looking at online platforms that, like a Zoom, we're all here on Zoom right now. How do you go about getting signatures and consent? So you're going to do that through e-signatures. So having a flexible service delivery, if you have students that are not able to have internet and remote access. If you are in person, how do you assure student safety in person? But if it's virtual, how do you ensure student safety, that their information, that they're in a secure platform? And also, how do you make sure that you have ways to document that student progress and attendance if it's a virtual provision? So again, getting together and talking through all of this. And we have some resources. Actually, Wayne, go ahead on to the next slide, because this resource shows strategies that can support learning across a continuum of internet access. And it's really, really useful. It helps you look at what strategies in your community you can do online, offline, or a hybrid, which would be a combination. So, you know, are there free and low cost internet programs? There's things as using a mobile hotspot on your phone. There are schools that have had Wi-Fi buses that go to a place in town, and they'll have that hotspot. Some states or areas have had public radio or TV, maybe a local access channel where students could have classes or services that way. You could do the old-fashioned mail out packets of information, or mail out a USB drive that they may use in a computer, and they can provide activities and fill them out and send them back to the counselor. So, you know, if there's in your community, if they're giving out free lunches or food distribution centers, making sure that you're there reaching those students. So lots of different opportunities there with that link, and I invite you all to look at that.
And we all know that one grandma in town that's going to get it out for everybody too. So, I mean, just drop a seed with grandma or auntie, she'll spread it around.
All right. Next slide. This is when we look at what we have to keep in mind as we move forward. Don't forget supporting those students who have already graduated or exited high school, and maybe they're in need of continued pre-employment transition services or other VR services, providing outreach and referral to maybe potentially eligible students with disabilities who may need pre-ETS during the next upcoming school year. And again, being flexible in how we provide service delivery. And on the next one, we're looking at, again, making sure that you think about continued student access. If schools do open back up and they're having limits on extra people that can come into buildings, or they change school schedules. And I spoke about student safety measures, and also then any risk factors or liability issues that may come into play if students are participating in any kind of summer or upcoming maybe school year work-based learning experiences in the community. So these are things that we keep in mind.
So some of the things that you've heard us talk about today included historical trauma and historical mistrust, and we wanted to give an opportunity not just to talk about it and hear about it. We want you to have an opportunity to learn where that comes from and why it's such a huge factor on our service areas with AIVRS programs. That it impacts, you know, individuals and groups, behaviors, emotions, and sorry, my computer's messing up. And perspectives. It stems from historical unresolved grief, disenfranchised grief, and internalized oppression. we found that there's 6 stages that lead to this historical trauma and mistrust, and it's the first contact. And when we talk about first contact, it's not when settlers were coming over into our lands. It was the very first time we had any interaction with them. You know, when the New World was found, supposedly. That's when we start talking about that first contact, because that's when we see that invasion and the impact that it had on how people started to think and the reactions that they had in their family. Economic competition, our lands were being taken, our furs were being taken in trade for lesser value. The invasion and war period, this is when we had the Indian Wars, reservation period, and boarding school period, forced relocation, and termination period. So all these things are attached to significant traumas that are still felt within our families today. It becomes a major barrier and will remain a barrier until the VR counselor is able to address this, or the state representative is able to acknowledge it and have a discussion about it. Some of the impacts we've seen from the historical trauma and mistrust is that we have individuals that are now experiencing decreased self-esteem and worth. During the removal of kiddos from their families and forced into boarding school, we've got a loss of identity. We've got poor parenting skills. They were taught a certain way through abuse and hardship, and that's what they brought back into their families, because there's a whole couple generations that were missed of these parenting skills. Discrimination. For a long time, Native people were thought to be lower class, animalistic, those types of things. We lost our government and were forced to take on another type of government. Our communities were destroyed. We learned very significant abusive behaviors. Survivor syndrome. So on the other side of that, the people that survived have high anxiety, increased impulsivity, depression, isolation, guilt. Guilt is a big one, because they were the ones that made it through. Perceived obligation to share in our ancestral pain. Fixation to trauma, transposition. So there's a lot of impacts that take place that today, I think a lot of people don't realize when we start talking to individuals from our service areas on our reservations, that this is still there. This hasn't been taken away. Each of us carries a piece of this with us from our families. So how do we address this? How do we start to help develop that relationship? We really need to respect and promote that cultural identity. Be aware of the values of the people that we're working with. Each tribe has very specific values and very specific ways they approach helping one another. We need to be aware of the emphasis on the natural order in the world instead of forcing an order to take place. Task and goal orientated versus relationship orientated. So a lot of our tribal people are very relationship orientated. Our culture is based around caring for one another, and it's a group identity. It's not an individual recognition. So when we start to have task class with relationships, in our world, relationships are going to win every time. We need to understand the family orientations and aware of communication styles. So when we are getting into these meetings with these families and their youth with disabilities, we need to identify the family structure. Is it matriarchal, patriarchal? Who needs to be included, involved in these meetings? That's a discussion that you can have with your AIVRS person, point of contact or liaison, whatever title they have. We need to discuss and reinforce the employment expectations. So in a lot of these situations, when we're working with really rural areas, there's limited employment opportunity. And there's never really been a discussion with any of our youth about what expectations towards employment there may be. I know there's a large population of our people that are living in these rural areas that they don't have an employment goal because there isn't any hope or opportunity for this employment. So their expectation is to get into some program and have enough food to eat from those programs, pay their bills, that type of thing. Facilitate model and model effective communication. Reinforce that this is a partnership. It's not a dictatorship. It's a partnership between the two agencies to help that individual or that youth with disabilities. We need to be aware of the diverse cultural backgrounds, and this is on both sides. So we as we come to the table, it's not just the state people being aware of the cultural components in the AIVRS world and the tribal impacts. We also have to take into account that the state has stuff they have to meet also. Discuss supported decision making. Again, it's not a dictatorship, it's a partnership. We got to align our motivations and goals of the educational world with the VR world, and that's both AIVRS and state. And it's really important that we help a lot of these youth get a voice. For so long they've been kept isolated or not allowed to have a voice. Ask the right questions. Establish a working relationship with your state's parent training center. Christine, you want to add anything, or are you good?
I think we're good. Yeah.
Oh, hey, look, we're done.
Yeah, and now here's the stars of the show today. We're going to hear from Washington State as they talk about their collaboration serving Native students with disabilities. So, next slide, Wayne.
Trying to find the right button, sorry. All right, Joy and Nick.
Joy, you're muted.
Thank you. Aitzkachil, good morning, welcome. I'm very excited to tell you about Lummi Vocational Rehabilitation and Washington State Division of Vocational Rehabilitation Collaboration. Presentation by Joy Kramer, Lummi Voc Rehab. Nick Harris, Washington State Department of Vocational Rehabilitation. The Lummi Nation is the third largest reservation in Washington State. There are about 5,000 tribal members. I'm going to read you a statement from Lummi. We are the Lakamish, the Lummi people. We are the original inhabitants of Washington's northernmost coast in southern British Columbia. For thousands of years, we've worked, struggled, and celebrated life on the shores and waters of Puget Sound. We are fishers, hunters, and gatherers, and harvest of nature's abundance. We envision our homeland as a place where we enjoy abundant life, safe, healthy life in mind, body, society, environment, space, time, and spirituality, where all are encouraged to succeed and none are left behind. Lummi Voc Rehab is committed to assisting Native American youth with disabilities in reaching their career goals. I'd like to take a moment to thank the Lummi tribe for the opportunity to work for them in transition. Lummi Voc Rehab received a grant in 2020 for 5 years. Our goal, Lummi Voc Rehab, DVR, Lummi Nation School, to collaborate to establish pre-employment training and transition plans, assist students with their transitions from school to work, college, and training. The bullet points below are transition activities listed in our grant. Lummi Voc Rehab engages students' services in apprenticeships, technical programs, and career connections. Summer youth work. So on the reservation, we have a summer youth program. Work readiness training, resumes, cover letters, and improved interview skills. Students will participate in industry tours, job fairs. We have a try-a-trade day where the students can actually get on heavy equipment and try it out. Career fair, college readiness training. We take students on tours of colleges. And last summer we went to the UW and they taught the students how to fill out fill out scholarship forms correctly. Next slide. Okay. Lummi Rehab Services Native American schools, neighboring schools, Lummi Nation School and Ferndale School. Lummi Voc Rehab Transition Program focuses on promoting successful transition for Native American Alaskan students 14 to 21. We promote outreach to identify students who are eligible for special education services and or eligible for Section 504 plans in need of transition services as early as possible. We provide transition planning for students leaving high school to engage in post-secondary career-related education and training and or employment opportunities. Why Lummi Voc Rehab and State DVR started working together to enhance services for our Native American transition students. We sought out a partnership with DVR. The Native American Indian Vocational Rehabilitation Services AIVRS program does allow for transition services that are directly tied to individual employment plans. However, pre-employment transition services are not allowable under the AIVRS program. Luckily, Washington State DVR can directly provide pre-employment transition services out of their 15%. How Lummi Voc Rehab program and state started working together. Our journey working together began in March 2019. March 7, 2020, I met a DVR representative at the Ferndale High School. He shared the career experiences and activities in the classroom. And one of the special ed teachers said how wonderful was that he would come in the classroom and help her get the students ready for the workforce. So I said, I think Lummi needs that. So I invited the DVR to meet with the Lummi Voc Rehab and Workforce Department to present on the benefits of pre-employment services. We had 5 or 6 meetings. They continued through the summer, spring and summer, and they finally agreed in August for Lummi Nation to work with DVR. Partnership and services, Lummi Voc Rehab, Lummi Nation, and DVR ESD 189. DVR invited Lummi Nation to participate in the pilot program due to being a high-needs school. 30% of IEPs are 504, 95% free and reduced lunch. October 2019, entered into an informal service agreement for pre-employment workshops. In March, services were interrupted due to COVID-19. Summer virtual activities continued because of the COVID-19 instead of on-site. Services will continue for the upcoming school year. All parties agree this is viable in helping students transition from high school to the workforce. How transition services are allocated. Lummi Voc Rehab can pay for the following: community experiences, development of employment, acquisition of daily living skills, and most of all, and most important, cultural activities. We had the students go out in the woods and gather their own cedar. They made cedar graduation caps, and we also offer Lummi language classes. This can be paid out of our funds and helps the students stay connected with their culture. DVR, pre-employment transition services, 15% funds can pay for job exploration, self-advocacy, workplace readiness, work-based learning, counseling on post-secondary programs. Referrals. Students attend a group pre-employment services at the Lummi school for about 50 minutes, and that's when Nick and I can go in and teach the pre-employment services. Students who need more intensive supports may apply for Lummi Voc Rehab and Washington State DVR at the same time. Lummi Nation staff and transition coordinators would refer students, so we knew which students needed more intense supports. Also, collaboration between agencies increased the IEP attendance. The following are a list of organizations involved. Lummi Nation School, Lummi Nation Vocational Rehabilitation, Lummi Nation Youth Services. They help coordinate a summer program where our students can get involved. Washington State Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, Job Corps, Taylor Driving School, Peace Health, Washington State Peace Corps, a new construction at ESD 189. Lummi Nation School. It's a K through school located on the Lummi Reservation. There are about 108 students, 9th through 12th grade. Carlene Toby, our transition coordinator, is a primary point person. She helps us coordinate our workshops, invites us to IEP meetings, and contacts students when we need to get a hold of them. It's very important you get to know who your key players are so you can move your program forward. All right, it's Nick.
Okay, well, thank you, Joy. So I'm gonna walk you guys through the next couple slides here. And first I wanna show that Washington State is divided up into 8 different educational service districts. So if you look in the northwestern part of this map, ESD 189, that's where our services happened with Lummi. We have a very high number of potentially eligible students. We have an estimated 36,000 students statewide. And within ESD 189, which is my service area, we have an estimated 14,500 students within that service area. So it's the second highest population within Washington State. And it basically covers Blaine, Washington to Linwood, Washington, Concrete to the San Juan Islands as well. So that's kind of how Washington State DVR and the educational service districts are divvied up within the state. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide. So for our service delivery that Joy and I did during this past school year, we were serving 40 Lummi Native American juniors and seniors. We featured monthly workshops that emphasize career exposure with the students. We included a website called Washington Career Bridge, a vocational assessment that's online called U-Science, that's YOU Science, and a career panel to end our first semester. Students demonstrated more engagement at the end of first semester, and then we utilized a team teaching approach between LVR and DVR. So both Joy and I were there in the class when we were having these workshops. You can go to the next slide. This is our application for group pre-employment transition services in Washington State. It's kind of hard to see, but towards the bottom there, there's 3 boxes that say yes or no. To be eligible for group pre-employment transition services in Washington State, you have to have an IEP, you have to have a 504 plan, or you have to have a disability without an IEP or 504 plan. So we would use this group application for all of our students in group services. We would collaborate with the school. The school would attest to whether or not the student had an IEP 504 plan or was a student with a disability without an IEP or 504 plan. And then if the students were under the age of 18, we would have the parents sign off on the back to be able to have the students participate in services. So we can go to the next slide. So this is our flyer that we had sent out to the school, and I'll go through these different phases with each of you to kind of talk through our service delivery model that we did. But really, in Washington State, our partnership with Lummi was fantastic. We really had a great partnership with Lummi, Tribal Voc Rehab, and Lummi Nation School. But as Joy mentioned, it took several meetings. It took 5 or 6 meetings before we could all come to the table and really start services. So I'm really happy that it came together. And so during phase 1, we really focused on workplace readiness training with the students. Phase 2, we focused on workplace-based, work-based learning activity. In phase 3, we focused on work-based learning. So we can go to the next slide here and I'll talk about each of those. So for our pilot project, it combines self-advocacy, job exploration, and workplace readiness training to expose students to jobs within the workforce. And we really tried to focus on jobs that were specific to Whatcom County and Lummi Nation. So, we were fortunate in the Pacific Northwest to have large employers like Microsoft and Boeing in the Seattle area. However, we were focused on jobs specifically within this area. So, and then we also focused on soft skills, basic employability skills, really uncovering the student's strengths and also developing a resume. Can go to the next slide there. Yep. So phase 1 of our pilot program. So that was workplace readiness training. So Joy and I had monthly workshops designed to introduce the workforce. We talked about jobs available in the community in Washington State. We met with employers to ask questions about different jobs, discover student strengths and support needs, and then practice self-advocacy and workplace communication. So basically for phase 1, and this was basically first semester, which was October of this past last year to January of 2020. We had monthly face-to-face workshops at Lummi Nation School. Our first lesson was on Washington Career Bridge. Our second lesson was on U-Science. Third lesson was on U-Science and discovering strengths. And then we had a career panel wrapping up our first semester. So now we can go to phase 2 on the next slide. So phase 2 was basically work-based learning activity. That was the career panel. So a career panel falls under the work-based learning activities category of pre-employment transition services. So we were fortunate, we had about 5 or 6 businesses come in and talk to Lummi Nation School. And it was a great opportunity for those students and the employers to interact with one another. Students learned about apprenticeships, they learned about Job Corps, they learned about AmeriCorps programs. It was just a great opportunity for interaction at the school. So we unfortunately didn't get to all of phase 2. After we did the career panel, our goal, and we had coordinated transportation with the school. So Lummi was going to provide transportation to these offsite activities, but we had a job site tour scheduled with Washington Conservation Corps. So that was one of the offsite activities that we had scheduled that we didn't get to. Washington Conservation Corps builds trails in Washington State, and they do salmon enhancement. And so we unfortunately didn't get to that one. We also have construction. We have a construction apprenticeship union down in Mount Vernon. We didn't get to that one, unfortunately, but that was where students can earn a really good wage on being an apprenticeship in construction in the trades. And then our third activity, which I personally was most excited about, was we had scheduled a tour of Boeing, which they manufacture 747s. And so Boeing, they start all their new employees at the riveting stations. And so we were going to be able to tour Boeing and being able to see the 747s being worked on and show the students that, hey, this is what manufacturing looks like. So we can go to the next slide here. So phase 3, work-based learning activities. This was kind of the carrot to our services. So we have a paid summer work-based learning experience where students are paid $13.50 an hour, which is minimum wage, and times 40 hours a week. And so we do have a couple work-based learning experiences happening this summer. We have a virtual work-based learning experience happening with a new that is a construction boot camp where they pay students to learn about construction. We're also doing a paid work-based learning experience with Cloud Mountain Farms. With Cloud Mountain Farms, the students are being paid actually for 7 weeks, 40 hours a week, to learn more about agriculture. And then our third work-based learning experience that DVR is partnering with is with Educational Service District 189. And that is a manufacturing academy down at Everett Community College at their Advanced Manufacturing Center, where students are being paid $13.50 an hour for 40 hours to get a hands-on experience learning about mechatronics, metal lathes, machining, all kinds of manufacturing that I really don't know a whole lot about. So we can go to the next slide here. So our career panel partners, so we were very fortunate to have all these partners work with us first semester. So Taylor Driving School. So Enjoy mentioned these earlier, but I just wanted to bring them up. Washington Conservation Corps, Peace Health, Job Corps, and ANEW were career panel partners. We can go and go to the next slide. So we used Washington Career Bridge to drive our service delivery. So we were basically trying to figure out for the group, what are the 16 different career clusters that the majority of the students are interested in? So these are the 16 different career clusters, and we're running a little bit behind on time, so I won't go into all of them. But you can see there on the slide, that's the 16 different ones. Let's go to the next slide. We used an online vocational assessment called U-Science. So U-Science basically sorts the group interest in career clusters. So U-Science tells us for the group, what are the majority of career clusters that the students are interested in. And so once we know that, that's how we coordinated our career panel. We tailored it towards interests that the students were interested in. That was kind of our group informed choice and kind of our way to provide, you know, services to students based off of what they're interested in, rather than just kind of throwing services at them and see what works. So U-Science is what we used. We can go to the next slide. So services that are offered virtually, so Career Connect at Home, that's actually through Washington Career Connect. That is a monthly career exploration opportunity for students to learn about real jobs and industries in Washington. So that was put on through a different agency than DVR, but really great opportunity for the students. But that was through Zoom, so that was offered virtually. A new construction boot camp. We're doing a virtual construction boot camp this year. So we're using Zoom and we're sending home kits. So we're sending home construction kits for the students to work on and everything like that. Virtual job shadow, virtual job shadow is an online work-based learning activity and includes job shadows. The ability to build in flex lessons, and then our last virtual opportunity offered virtually is Junior Achievement. They are hosting a finance park event. They complete 13 financial literacy lessons, and they allow for virtual participation. Go ahead and go to the next slide there. All right, Joy, I'll turn things over to Joy. Joy's gonna do this slide here. You're on mute, Joy.
Lessons learned. Prepared for the unexpected. Snow days, coronavirus interrupts our workshops. Having alternative pre-employment activities ready. You never know what's coming up. Getting to know the audience better. Could have allowed for advanced curriculum modification for students. Being highly adaptable. Created an engaging learning environment required by students. Service delivery. Service delivery built positive relationships with the Lummi Nation staff. A win-win for everyone.
And we're gonna skip questions for now and hold questions to the end, just because we're running a little bit below on time. So I'll let Joy grab the next slide here.
Let us put our minds together to see what we can build for our children. Chief Sitting Bull.
And we want to thank everybody for allowing us to tell our story. Like I mentioned earlier, it was great partnership with Lummi VR and Lummi Nation School, and just very grateful for being able to share this with everyone.
Well, thank you, Nick and Joy, and it was a great example of showing how the partners work together. So now we're going to move on and hear from our colleagues in Wisconsin.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Today we're here to talk about the potential eligible and Pre-ETS partnership within the Tribal and State VR. My name is Thomas Draghi, and I'm a regional manager for the Department of Workforce Development's Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, and I'll let my partner introduce herself.
Good afternoon, and I am Maria Nevala, and I've been a VR counselor for 18 years for Great Lakes Intertribal Council, also known as our VRNA program.
Thank you, Maria. Next slide. So today we're going to talk a little bit about a program that we developed in northwestern Wisconsin. Our state's broken into 11 workforce development areas, and Maria and I work in the workforce development area number 7. It's in northwestern Wisconsin. We serve, or at least the state serves, 5 reservations. Maria works with at least 2 of those tribes or reservations within our service delivery area. But we really wanted to talk a little bit about potentially eligible and pre-employment transition services. So we're looking just at what the definition is, and the definition through 361.4AA requires DVR agencies to provide pre-employment transition services, or Pre-ETS, to all students with disabilities, regardless if they've applied for or been determined eligible to receive DVR services. Next slide, please. Who is potentially eligible? A student with a disability who is a high school or post-secondary education training program, 14 to 21 years old, has an IEP or 504 plan or a documented disability, and has been determined eligible or ineligible for DVR services. Next slide, please. We talked a little bit about this earlier today, so I won't spend a lot of time on this, but what services are available? As Christine talked about earlier, those are job exploration counseling, work-based learning, counseling on opportunities for transition or post-secondary, workplace readiness training, and instruction on self-advocacy, which includes peer mentoring. And today, really the main focus for the state agency here at Wisconsin DVR and our partner, Vocational Rehab for Native Americans, and Maria, was really our work-based learning. And as we progress into our slides, we'll kind of talk a little bit about that. So this is one of the things that we wanted to kind of take a little time on this slide and really explain a little bit of the history behind what we did in Northwestern Wisconsin with the Vocational Rehab for Native Americans program and the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation Summer Youth Program. Back in 2017, my state agency counselor, who acts as a liaison to the Bad River Band of Lake Superior and the Red Cliff Band of Lake Superior, was talking with Maria, and they thought about the idea of developing a summer youth program for students living on or near the reservations as defined by the American Indian Vocational Rehab grants. And myself, being a past director from an American Indian program here in Wisconsin, thought that was a great idea. Number one, American Indians are defined as an underserved population within the Rehabilitation Act. Secondly, there's a lot of times high unemployment rates on the reservations. Thirdly, we knew that 2 of our reservations were having some funds decreased with their summer youth programming. And also we were entering into a world of potentially eligible students. So we sat down with Maria, myself as the regional manager, and some tribal leadership. And we really formed a relationship or a bond to really look at how we were going to do this. And we did that mid-late 2017, and we went into 2018 with the ability to serve. We targeted, we set a goal of about 50 students, but you can see on the slide, between the 2 reservations, we served about 39 students. Out of the 31 students at Bad River, 1 was a DVR consumer or a client of ours that had an IPE. Out of the 8 Red Cliff youth, 2 DVR consumers with IPEs, and we had 1 Promise consumer. The Promise grant was a partnership that DVR was a partner back a few years ago. It was a 5-year grant through the department or through Social Security Administration. And so we worked in partnership with our Promise counselors, our tribal counselors, our state counselors to serve these youth. You know, and the unique thing about this was really the collaborations, the partnerships that we had, and the communications, really to serve the needs of our youth, and also to serve our business partners on the reservations, because we understood and realized that this is where most of our students live. This is where most of their family lives and works. And so really, if we could incorporate the ability for our students to work where they live and learn real skills, real jobs, we were really ahead of the game. Maria, would you like to add anything relating to these numbers on our first year?
Yeah, so the first year, the Bad River Band had Natural Resources also had wrote a grant, and so they had 20 students that they were funding from the Natural Resource Program. So we were still sitting at 51 students, but we didn't include them in because we networked and paid for the 31 students as well. So we did have high numbers, but they had, we're trying to, you know, get summer youth up and running as well. So I just wanted to, you know, we did have a higher population of youth working, but a different agency picked them up.
Mm-hmm. You know, and one of the unique programming ideas that we had were in Wisconsin was that we used a local service provider to act as our third party to pay these individuals. And so we used a local agency to be able to do that. They provided work permits at a cost of $10 each, in which our agency purchased DVR. We did that for those students under the age of 16. Our state law required those individuals working under 16 to have a work permit. So we were able to purchase that. But in doing so, our partnership was formed not just with our tribal businesses or our governments, but not only our state agency and the Tribal Vocational Rehabilitation Program, but outside employment agencies that do this type of work within our communities and within the tribal communities. So our kids and our parents were very familiar with all of the players involved with this, and really it was a collaboration, not just of the state and tribal agency, but of some of our workforce partners through the Job Center that acted as a partner in this program also. So it was very critical for us to have that partnership. And again, it's really about the communication. It's about the development of a specific program that can serve the youth that need to be served. In 2019, we learned quite a few things in 2018, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through the slides. But in 2019, we served 51 youth on Bad River and 8 youth at Red Cliff. And again, 25 of those were returning students for a second year with Bad River. That speaks volumes in terms of the relationship that the students formed, not only with our state folks that were working with them and get them into the summer youth program, but our tribal liaisons such as Maria and our partnerships that we had. 4 students were DVR consumers with IPEs, and we paid for 24 new work permits for those kids under the age of 16. You know, and I think that's one of the successes that we had related to this was the ability to work together to make this happen. I know in 2018, 2019, we had some challenges related to some of our state or our tribal governments, and it took myself and Maria, when we were at a national conference, until about 6:30, 7 o'clock to kind of work out some details with our tribes and their work sites, so we were able to have that ability. But again, it was a commitment by Maria, myself, and our local staff to be able to ensure the success of these students, and it was really critical that we had that. And one of the things that I like to speak about, and I'm going to have Maria talk a little bit more in depth about that, is, you know, one of the reasons why our American Indian vocational rehabilitation programs are here is to be able to serve our Native youth and our Native people culturally in an appropriate setting and have the ability to do that. And the nice thing about our summer youth program and being tied to both Bad River and Red Cliff was our ability, or Maria's ability, to work with the tribes to enhance some cultural learning for these students through the summer youth program through a wide variety of methods. And I'll let Maria talk a little bit about that.
Okay, so I just kind of want to back up to like where the work permits were when Tom said that we were at a KNR working until 6:30 at night. And one of the challenges that year was that with these work permits and the third-party vendor, they wanted our families with the parents, the grandparents, the aunties, guardianship, to drive 22 miles off the reservation to go fill out these work permits. And so this was like 2 or 3 days before they were to start work. So we had the 31 students that trying to get all these families to one place. And so Tom and I worked, and we, the collaboration that came from that was that we had that vendor come to the reservation. One person came there with all the forms, and then the families were to, you know, come to the community center and meet and sign them forms. That was a trust thing. It's hard for our families to go off the reservation and go to a stranger and start filling out forms for their kids. But when they came out to the reservation and we were there, it just made the process a lot easier. So I just wanted to touch base on bringing vendors to the reservation and work. So the other thing, like Tom was talking about, was culturally appropriate services. And I really wanted to make sure that a lot of those areas were touched upon when we were trying to figure out where we were going to place 31 students the first year. And so I'm just going to kind of give a couple examples. I wrote down, I thought we had like 12 work sites identified for them, but then when I started going through it, we had a lot more. So some of the places where we had placed our students were Head Start, Social Services, the Elders Program, the fisheries, road department, education department, childcare, the clinic, healthy lifestyles, the Boys and Girls Club, and then we had a wild rice restoration program at that time too. So with the culturally appropriate services that we had these youth work in, we had a couple elders that had a contract to build a birch bark canoe to go to the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. to be on display. So we had 6 students working with those elders, and they went out and they from harvesting the birch bark to pine sap, bear grease, spruce roots, collecting rocks. Those 2 elders worked with those youth, and they built a 18-foot canoe, and it's still at the Smithsonian right at this moment on display. We had food sovereignty program where we had tobacco plants, sage and sweetgrass, and we had some students work with the traditional plants under the guidance of elders on how to take care of those plants. And then when it came time to harvest, those students took those plants over to the elders, and they worked together with the youth and the elders to dry it and then get those teachings. Wild rice restoration, we had some students go down into our wild rice sloughs and identify potential, I'm trying to find the words, say if there was fungus, or try to identify why our wild rice in certain areas was not growing. So they did some scientific studies with our marine biologists. We did a lot of plant making and medicine making as well too, so that those students went out in the woods and they got to learn. That was for the Bad River. Over in Red Cliff, which is a different tribe and their heritage, even though we're all the same Ojibwe, a lot of the teachings are different just because the land is different over there. So they are more of, their fisheries is the lake trout and herring, and so they were out in the big lake with the Coast Guard and with the tribal DNR over there working as well, and raising those fish from small to where they were able to release them back into the waters when they got to, I don't know, about maybe 4 or 5 inches long. Those are just some of the examples of culturally appropriate services that we did try to make sure that our students were hooked up with. Another thing too that I would like to say is our school districts worked very well. We had homeschool coordinators that worked well with our DVR tribal liaison counselors, and they would come out to the reservation, which was really nice to see. We even had, if I remember correctly, in Red Cliff, we had the principal even show up, and a lot of the LD teachers as well. So they were really involved, and they really wanted to be part of this as well, to make this to work and to continue to work. So I really enjoyed seeing the service providers outside of our reservation go above and beyond and come out to the reservation. They wanted to learn. They wanted to know how to work with our students. And that when I was sitting at that table with the families, the aunties, the grandparents, moms and dads and the students there, and that joking, you know, I know that they talked, Wayne talked about joking and laughing. You know, there was a lot of jokes, there was a lot of laughter. You know, I would introduce, you know, John Doe's mom and dad to our DVR specialists, and the father, you know, would make a joke, you know, and right away I would start laughing, and you know, it eased it, and it was a good thing. So I'll let you go back, Tom.
Thank you, Maria, for sharing. But you can see the collaboration that we've had locally related to our youth. And I did forget the collaborations we had with our school districts, because without our schools, this wouldn't have been possible. And that was really where we had a lot of starting points. So next slide, please. So these are some of the roles with our summer youth programming, and we kind of talked a little bit about some of these, but I'll go through those. Recruitment, really, Maria talked a little bit about that. We had attended recruitment activities on each reservation or schools to recruit students. We worked with third party to ensure work permits were completed for students, and I think Maria did a good job of speaking to that. Maria, did you want to add anything about the recruitment?
So the recruitment part, we like I said, we started with the schools. We had our homeschool tribal coordinators send home applications, and then both tribes have a Facebook community page, and so they advertised on the Facebook community page that applications would be at the admin office, at the Boys and Girls Club, at the youth building. And then I even think we went as far as like early childhood centers and Head Start centers. We sent home applications with all the students, whether they had a child at home that was age 15 to 18. Applications went home. So we really pushed the applications everywhere. We even set up at the powwows, DVR and our program. We got a little shaded canopy and 2 little chairs, and we sat out all weekend at a powwow and had our applications there and met with the students as they were walking, which really surprised me, because at a powwow, you have all sorts of different people that come from different areas. So we had students that were from, Minnesota to the Dakotas to Michigan stopping by and asking if they could sign up. And, they just heard the word work and Native student. So we hit different avenues, I guess, that we know that the youth would be there and the parents. So I don't know, I think I might have missed a couple, but just that to give you an idea that, we did try to use the old fashioned way, the hybrid, and, the internet,
Right. Next slide, please. So as we moved in from the recruitment and paperwork, as Maria talked, we got into working with our work sites and also transportation. And the one thing that we wanted to do was focus on work sites on the reservations for our students, and Maria went through some of those sites earlier, and I think the next slide will list a few of those too. But we also had our third party also monitor and follow up with students and the management at those sites to ensure that our students were doing a good job if we had to deal with any issues. And so that was really, I think, a very positive for us, because our work sites and our students in the tribe knew our local provider, and it was a really good fit. And I'll let Maria talk a little bit about the transportation piece.
Right. So we are in very rural Wisconsin, way up north. And I do have a map of our brochure, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be backwards. But this is my service area in the yellow, and the black would be Lake Superior. So we are very remote. And we have our communities in the Bad River. We have 6 small communities, but they're anywhere from 30 miles apart to even 5 miles apart. So what we did as an incentive to help the parents get their children to their work site was that every Friday, if they got their child to work on time and then picked their child up, we provided them with a $25 gas card for the 6 weeks that we had the summer youth going. We did have some transit pass buses that did bring the kids as well. So we did provide transportation and provided uniform tops. We made sure that all the students had a t-shirt that showed that they were, you know, part of the work crew. This year, we did the same thing, but we also added homemade PPE masks to that as well as to the students.
Thank you, Maria. Yep, next slide. Maria talked earlier a little bit about our worksite locations and Family Human Services, Youth Center or Elderly Centers, the Earth Partnerships, the Bad River Clinic, Healthy Lifestyles, as Maria talked about, the TANF programs. On Red Cliff, we worked with the Legendary Waters Resort and Marina Campground, their Department of Natural Resources, the Police Department, the Tribal Preservation Department, Administration Building, and Public Works. And I know we've missed a few, but these were some of the larger ones. And you know, we really focused on what each reservation's needs were related to summer youth programming. And one of the things that Maria and I really stressed was we want these to be real jobs for kids to experience real life work experiences and gain skills. And so I'm kind of excited about the next two slides or three slides. Maria, do you have anything to add to our work locations?
No, that's,
okay.
Yeah,
okay.
We're good.
So some of the results, you saw earlier we had 31 students. For us in Wisconsin, we paid for the summer youth programming, and when it was all said and done in 2018, we spent about $56,000, and in 2019 we spent about $100,000. And so for me, this isn't about the spending money, but look at the students that we served, look at the experiences that they've gained. For me, it's about the empowerment. It's about for these students with disabilities or potential disabilities to move ahead and grow as young adults on the reservations where there's been traditional high unemployment rates, but yet focus on positives for them. And the next slide will really the next few slides will kind of talk to you about that. Next slide, please. So when it was all said and done, we asked what tribal leadership had to say. We also asked what parents had to say, but we started with the leadership first. And this was a quote from D. Goki Rindle, the tribal operations manager for the Bad River Band of Lake Superior Chippewa of Indians. The Bad River DVR-VRNA partnership has offered Bad River youth a unique opportunity to learn job skills through culturally responsive summer youth programming in their own community. It was an exceptional learning experience which actually empowered youth to make more informed choices about educational and career options. Feedback from students was overwhelmingly positive. And then we have a quote from Nathan Gordon, who was the vice chairman of the Red Cliff Tribe. The experience was great and glad to have the opportunity to collaborate with Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development, Vocational Rehab for Native Americans, Ashland Sepp, who was our third party, and Great Lakes VRNA, which is who Maria works for, to bring such a wonderful learning youth empowerment program to Red Cliff and the community. Having a program for our youth here at Red Cliff is a needed thing, as employment opportunities in this area are scarce and have declined over the years for our youth. And so I don't know if you want to add anything, Maria, but I know from our tribal leadership, you know, from year to year, they're fully engaged and really want to see us continue to do this.
Yeah, they are 100% loving our partnership and coming in and working with our youth. Unfortunately, with COVID-19, our little tribe across the bay has a high percentage of elders, and so they are still protecting their communities. So right as of right now, we're still kind of in limbo, I think, of hearing back from Red Cliff.
Yeah.
Bad River is, and you know, I know we're out of time, but we've worked hard to do the social distancing and going forward with Bad River this year. So we've changed things up.
Yes, we've taken the COVID precautions with our tribe that was going to continue this year. And lastly, we would like to show you what parents had to say about the program. To parents, I would just like to say that the summer youth program helped my son to learn the value of hard work and budgeting. When he started the program, he was very enthusiastic about learning how to work as a team and how it incorporated our culture, from building and caring for the environment to having fun at the same time. He was very careful as to his needs, so he did learn the value of the dollar. If he didn't need it, he didn't buy it. I love that quote for any parent out there that it would, and just, you know, to have this parent say that about him learning work skills, but for me, coming from our culture, it's important that our kids learn our culture and who we are and where we come from. And another parent said, the bus pass helped my child a lot with getting to and from the community center each day. Thank you. And so for myself and Maria, I think it's the empowerment of our Native youth in our communities about employment and what employment means on the reservation, and to take pride in that, and to take pride that, you know, if you work for the tribal government or you work in a tribal entity, that is one of the most satisfying things that can happen for people. You know, and again, wherever careers take people, that's an opportunity for each individual to decide for themselves. So, Maria, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I would like to. Tom is, you know, like he said, he's the director, but, you know, I work closely with our tribal liaison, our DVR counselor, and I don't know if other states have that, if their area that has a TVR program, if their state DVR has a tribal liaison, but if they don't, I really suggest talking and opening up that dialect with your DVR office to have that, because she has made a world of difference. And she comes out here, she's engaged in the community. And now that she has been doing that, a lot of our families know her name, know DVR, and it's said in a positive way, and that's that trust. So that would be one thing to suggest. And if anybody, you know, would like to email me and to see how to start that, or Tom, I think that's kind of where that starts, is with the counselor to counselor, federal, you know, TVR to our state.
Thank you, Maria. It really does start with trust. And I know all too many times state agencies are very concerned about numbers and time and people meeting, but it really comes down to our state counselors being on the reservations, to be seen, to be trusted, and to have a better understanding of the communities they serve. And I think the counselor you work with is an exceptional counselor that does that. She learns the community, she understands the community, she takes time to do that. And I think that's where the commitment is. If states want to have success, it's really about getting your staff involved with the tribal communities and showing up and being there, showing that you not just care, but you're there for the commitment for the disabled youth or disabled adults that we work with. And really, I thank you for that, Maria. And for those of you who do need anything from us, the last slide here is our contact information. And we do apologize for running over a few minutes here, but we felt it important that we share at least our message and how we work in Wisconsin. And by no means is it perfect. And I know there's other states and tribes that have these relationships too, but this is just one way that we've done it. So thank you.
I'm going to blame it on Nick for us going over.
Oh, thank you guys so much. I mean, Wisconsin, Washington, you guys really gave a great picture of this collaboration and partnership. And I think we can all learn from it so much. So again, thank you all so much for this. Wayne, I'll let you go ahead and show the resource.
So as we get wrapping up here, we got the resources on this page. We got some historical trauma, transition resources. These are shared with from Tom and Maria. Just it gives you a really good look at some of the history behind all of this that we talked about today, as far as developing the relationships and the importance of addressing these concerns in the relationship.
This slide and the next one are just resources that that you can explore afterwards about providing services for students and youth. And I think it's self-explanatory there, Boyne. So you can, yep.
Yeah, we're not going to hang out here too long. You guys can look on the PowerPoint for the
This
links.
particular slide right there this is an upcoming training that's happening on July 9th. And it's all about connecting youth virtually. It's from the Department of Labor's ETA. So I included that there because I think it's a great resource for people to maybe look at and start that conversation on how to serve students virtually.
Yeah, you know, piggybacking on this stuff is Christine and I were having a side conversation while listening to the states, and we might be coming out with a couple pre-recorded videos on a couple topics that were covered today because we want to clarify some stuff. So keep your eyes open for that as well.
Mhm.
Okay, here's what you guys been waiting for, the thank you slide. Please go to the links listed here. We put them in the chat box as well. The first one is the CRC credit being offered through George Washington University. Click on that, take your survey, get your credits, all that fun stuff. The second one is the AIVRTTAC survey. It gives us great data that we're going to share with WINTAC. So please fill those out for us. Christine, did you want to? Well, you already did. All right, never mind. Or John did. Somebody did. It magically appeared in the box.
I would like to say thank you to Wayne and Christine for inviting me and having me participate in this. So thank yous as well.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yes, thank you from the state of Wisconsin. We do really appreciate our collaborations with our partners.
Julie, to answer your question, yes, we will email the links to all this stuff.
Yeah, and thanks to all of you that were stayed on past our time to listen to the presentation, but it will be recorded. It'll be posted on the AIVRTTAC and the WINTAC website, and we'll make sure we get that information out. So again, thanks to everyone. This was really great. Look forward to further collaborations.
Yes, and any questions, please feel free to reach out to Christine or myself. We can direct those questions to the appropriate people to get answered. And like I said, keep your eyes open. I think we're going to do some stuff to answer some of the questions in the chat box later.